Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Third Age Forum. We're glad to have you all here. Welcome to those of you who are on the live stream also. I'd like to start with a brief prayer from David Shin.
Thank you, Sue.
What timing?
Good morning. It's so good to be here with you and good to see you on this beautiful spring day. I'd like to invite you to join your hearts with mine as we open this time with a prayer. Let us pray. Loving and merciful God, we give you thanks for this day. We thank you for the joy of being an Easter season and the joy of being an Easter people, that the message of resurrections and hope and love persists, and that we continue, Lord, with the strength that you have given to us, and we give you thanks for your guidance of your Holy Spirit. As we gather this day, we give you thanks for the hard work of the Third Age committees and all those hands that makes it possible to have this program, and especially for our speaker this day. Bless all who hear this message, both in person as well as online, now or later time, that truly their hearts will be nurtured by the joy of art and the inspirations of art that indeed move us beyond ourselves and to see the world in the beautiful world that you have created and all the joy that you have filled. We give you thanks, O God, for this day. May you, Lord, bless our time and our fellowship. And this we pray in your name. Amen. Amen.
Hi all, welcome. We will get started in a moment, and I know we're setting out some more chairs, which is great because some extra folks have come. But as we wait, maybe just take a moment to connect with the folks at your table, and you might start chatting a little bit about arts and downtown and sort of what you notice, how you've noticed things changing, and that'll help kind of get you in the headspace for the talk that we're about to have. Thank you.
Welcome once again. I'm going to start by introducing Dr. Amanda Weber, who many of you know, some of you may not. She received a doctorate of musical arts from the University of Minnesota in 2018, a Master of Musical degree in choral conducting at the Yale School of Music and Institute of Sacred Music in 2013, and a Bachelor of Arts in Music and Art at Luther College in 2008. Dr. Weber was recognized by the Yale Institute of Sacred Music as a conductor of exceptional promise and achievement. She is passionate about uniting music, art, and community through her work as a conductor, teacher, performer, artist, and social activist. Dr. Amanda Weber currently serves as Director of Worship and the Arts at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Minneapolis, where she oversees a wealth of arts programming. Her role in this position is as eclectic, as her skills. She's electric too. Conducting a wide array of repertoire, curating the Minnesota Performing Arts Series, serving as lead vocalist in Westminster's Bluegrass Band, developing the Artist in Residence program, and collaborating in worship planning. Her work explores the intersections of art, spirituality, and justice, and their impact on the community. With a deep love for teaching, Amanda has served as adjunct professor for Concordia University in St. Paul and the University of Wisconsin River Falls. She co-facilitated a social justice and music course at St. Olaf College and was a vocal instructor for theology students at Yale Divinity School. She also taught high school at the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts in Hartford, Connecticut. Dr. Weber is founder and artistic director of Voices of Hope, an organization that builds choral singing communities in correctional facilities throughout the state of Minnesota. She is highly gifted, receiving numerous awards and recognitions, including the 2023 Young Alumni Award from Luther College, Julius Herford Dissertation Prize in 2018, American Choral Directors Association, Chorus America, English Al Jahiras, Yale University, and we are delighted to have her today in conversation with Ben Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sue. We're not here for me, but that was very kind to introduce me, and I get to introduce our guest, which is much more exciting. This is Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson works for the city of Minneapolis. Yeah, well, we're excited already. Ben works for the city of Minneapolis as the first director of the recently created Department of Arts and Cultural Affairs. His decades of experience include managing departments and programs focused on arts and culture across the nation, as well as here in Minnesota. The department works with internal and external stakeholders to promote Minneapolis as a center for arts and culture and advance cultural equity, equality, and inclusion through the arts. Ben comes to Minneapolis from Beverly Hills, California, where he served as arts and culture manager. Before that, he was the director of performing arts for the Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. His experience includes leadership roles in arts and culture at UCLA, University of Minnesota's Northrop Concerts and Lectures, University of Michigan's University Musical Society, and the Ordway Center for the Performing Arts. Ben received a bachelor's and master's degree in arts administration from St. Mary's University of Minnesota in Winona. So he's actually from Minnesota, a rural country boy. Come home. So welcome to Ben. It's great to have you, and we're just so excited to learn today a little bit more about your position and kind of what you see, what you're doing in this position. So, for those gathered here today, if you don't know if this is new information to you, this is a new position for our city. And so, kind of the way I thought we might get into today's conversation is to chat about, is this a common position in big cities, and what made Minnesota, Minneapolis, decide to create it here? So tell us a little bit about your job and what it entails.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I just want to say thank you. I'm sorry I was a few minutes late, but I'm at the beck and call of the mayor of the city of Minneapolis. So I would be remiss if I didn't first recognize my old friend Kathy, who is here. And I knew her husband, and I know her daughter. I worked with her daughter at the University Musical Society in Ann Arbor, Michigan for a number of years. And my former boss, his name was Ken Fisher, which is Kathy's husband's brother. And so, and they were wonderful. And they were wonderful when I used to be the director of Northrop Concerts and Lectures. Kathy hosted this incredible event out at their house and was always super generous and very kind. So I just have to recognize Kathy. Yes, and what you said is all true. I am from Minnesota. I was raised on a 5-generation family farm in south of Rochester in a town called Leroy. My mom was a visual artist, and my dad was a math genius, basically. They both went to college in Winona in the 60s. During this radical time of art making in Winona, and I don't think that we've claimed that history for our state, that there was this really important art moment and art movement that happened and in Winona. And so my mom was part of that, and I remember being dragged to houseboats and to communes as a 3 or 4-year-old. My mom was kind of a hippie, cool artist. But farm wife. And so my earliest sense memories is the smell of paint and clay. So when I smell those things, I'm immediately drawn back, as well as, the smell of manure from growing up on a farm. And hay. She can't really handle that much anymore. So it's been great because I've been able to also start an arts career. I'm a product of the great age of arts education in public school systems throughout the whole state. I don't know if it's still that way, but there's only 125 people in my school, and I had jazz band, concert band, big band, learned how to play 4 instruments. The instruments were free. We had free instruction. We had 2 choruses, 2 theater programs. We had all this stuff. And I took piano lessons in Rochester. I took dance classes in Rochester. So a lot of access, and I just thought that's how it would be in the state of Minnesota. And I think there is this common value that we share, that we all really center and love as an important part of our identity, the creative, artistic community of our state, as well as Minneapolis being a real symbol of where big things happen, big contemporary things happen, experimental, world-class, festivals, ensembles, and artists. We want them to move here, we want them to live here, we want them to thrive here. And so I was a product of that. And I just remember growing up in Leroy, the small town, no money, no car, no telephone, no computer, really not even, we had Iowa Public Television as one station. And I just felt if I could just get to Minneapolis, I would know what it feels like to be next to artists and musicians. I honestly was like, oh, I can't wait. And then I went to college in Winona, which was the closest place I got to. And I remember there was this girl named Bridget from the cities, and she had purple hair because it was the time that Prince was here. It's like, oh my God, you're so cool. And she's like, oh yeah, I just hung out at the New French Cafe in the Warehouse District. And everyone's like, oh, you got to hang out next to musicians? I had such FOMO. But now, of course, that's all I do is hang out with artists. So,
and we're not as cool as you thought we were, so sorry.
And so I think about that a lot because I was like, this is what Minneapolis is. This is what it should be as we think about what this department is. And but I also think that because I was raised in very much a Minnesotan, I was able to live in Ann Arbor, Detroit for 13 years, and in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills for 10. So I was able to unlearn how to be Minnesotan, so I could actually be more effective here in this position in many ways. Not taking anything away from being Minnesotan, but to have like a more global experience. And I would want any artistically motivated person to have other experiences and have the context for what other big cities are contending with, and really understand that there are a lot of models and good thinking that's happening everywhere else, and we should be a repository and a leader in those things as well. So yeah, I started my job March of last year, and the department is only 1 year old, well, as of January of 2023. It was founded, or that started the process of talking about it during COVID. So I think in 2021 that the city should have a Department of Arts and Cultural Affairs. And it was approved. I think there was some contention about why would we start that when there's so many other pressing issues. And I always think, well, arts are just as much of a pressing issue as anything if you understand how do you support the quality of life of a city. And so they started it. And then so this is a brand new department, and it's a brand new position. And I always say that it's so great that the city expressed great arts leadership during COVID to start a department, but on the other hand, it's like, why hasn't the city of Minneapolis had a department for 50 years? We're Minneapolis, we should have had this a long time ago. And our department is small and mighty, we have a lot of vision, but all the great art cities have a Department of Arts and Culture. So my budget right now is probably $2 million, and a lot of that just goes to staffing. The city of Seattle's budget is $85 million. The city of New York is $125 million. The city of San Francisco is $110 million. They spend more money in Nashville than we do. And that goes to support the infrastructure of ensuring that your facilities, your museums, now we don't own any facilities. We do own the Cole Center, but that is turned out to an operator at some point. But when I was the director of performing arts of the city of Los Angeles, I managed 7 city-owned theaters, but we don't have that same program here. And so we're not paying for the maintenance of infrastructure and all the staffing to maintain that. So I'm hoping that what we will do is really expand and grow what we do to support artists and have really fantastic, imaginative, wild, crazy, amazing, impactful programs all over our city that really allow the creatives in our community to achieve their full vision about what they would like to create, as well as really amplify and support that process of like investing in artists to reimagine and invigorate and create vibrancy for our city that I think everybody values and appreciates.
Wow, the numbers of the budget comparison are like shocking, and I heard kind of a from our crowd. And similarly, I remember when we spoke earlier, there was the staffing comparison too. So I think you had said here you've got like 6 staff in your department, and how many was it in LA on this staff?
125.
So it's fascinating because, I think we all think of Minnesota as like such a hub for the arts. This is such an amazing place. There's so many arts here. And I know when I moved here, everyone was saying, Minnesota has more grants funding for the arts than like any other state or whatever. So we tend to take so much pride in it. And so what I'm hearing you say is that there is kind of that excitement and interest from people. There are the artists here, but there's not the supportive structure in place to help us thrive. Is that, what are you seeing kind of in your first year? Is this the magical artist like community that we think it is, or are we just completely off base?
No, it is, but we're in a moment of change. And, the city of Minneapolis does not have an arts grants program. We don't have one. They spend more money in St. Paul than they do in Minneapolis. There are programs through our community planning and economic development department or health services or neighborhood engagement that artists could apply for, but it's not investing in artists being artists and creating work and creating the things that artists uniquely do. So we're going to advocate for having an impact fund that any artist, we want everyone to lean into their creative instinct and fund creative ambition in our city. And part of that is just our ability to help shape that, to actually provide platforms and to incubate what is uniquely Minnesota and uniquely Minneapolis. And if we're going to be the symbol of it, let's invest in it in the way that we invest in public works, that we invest in infrastructure. Culture is also it has to have an infrastructure of support, which we currently don't have. What we have had historically is a lot of historic philanthropy. And so we've always been a great state of major foundations and people of wealth wanting to invest in the arts and corporations that were here. And then we were the talk of the nation, and uniquely that we have the legacy funds. And that's really about supporting funding going out throughout the entire state. And everyone's like, oh my God, Minneapolis just is so on it and progressive and forward-looking. But it also doesn't stabilize us. Those are all project grants. Some of them are operations grants. And I have a thesis about it, about where we're at right now and kind of like why we need to have a real rethink about what's happening in our city. And, at the turn of the century, our city's founders, who the wealth of the food economy, actually really invested in making sure we had an orchestra, museums, a really vibrant cultural life, and they were throwing big money around it. Now, I'm not an expert on this story. And then I think it was Mr. Dayton who said, any business that moves here, he's going to have a meeting with them at the Minneapolis Club and say 5% of your total income goes to reinvesting in the arts. And they all did it. And we're lucky that we have all of these amazing Fortune 500 companies here and really great artists that want to work here and then audiences to support them. So then those corporations, those early founders of philanthropy, really centered that, and then their children did, and their children continue to give, and then those corporations have been sold, and the people who ran those corporations lived here and continued that philanthropy, and those corporations have then been sold, and the people who run them don't live here, and during COVID, all the philanthropy stopped. So this historic thing that we all had as really centering for, not all, but I should just say, it's changed, and our foundations are there. And what's happened because of that is that, in many ways, I sort of feel our whole arts and culture ecosystem has been tricked in a way, because they've only been told, you can do whatever you want, but you have to go grovel at the feet of foundations, corporations, and major gifts people. So they have invested in huge development staffs to throw events and coordinate us and galas all over this town for little bits of money. And so imagine if our public works department had to go fundraise to Target to get potholes fixed. That's what we've done to the arts in our city. Or like the Vikings didn't get to have a stadium, so they had to book whatever field was available, and then every player on the team had to fundraise against each other to be on the team. That's what we've done to the arts. And so I don't think that's fair. And so we should have. And what's happened then, because of the arts organizations, which we all love and celebrate, and all that, so you'll notice things are starting to the contract and the infrastructure. So the glory days of the great age of philanthropy, in my mind, are over. And so we have to turn our city into something new where we move from charity to industry and find new models to help artists and culture thrive, and really be at the forefront of what really makes this a real creative economy. And so one of the things I've been recognizing is that not only have all of the arts organizations been taught that this is the system, that a behavior that is learned from that is that also they walk on eggshells and for fear of doing something too risky, that their funding will get pulled. So where's our bold, vibrant, creative, innovative artists? They're sort of kowtowing to whatever the funders are wanting, which is no, I think there should be a spark of and spirit of real creativity and innovation experimentation, because that's what it was when I was growing up. But also, it also taught everyone to fight against each other for limited resources, so it's a model of scarcity. So actually coming together is really actually a challenge, because it's like an unlearned behavior anymore. So just pulling together different sectors, the film community, the dance community, they're oh, well, who's in the room? Is there a funder in the room? As opposed to let's all work together. And what I've been told is I need to work more like the Bike Alliance. So if you want a lane down Hennepin Avenue and you're in the Bike Alliance, they just press one button and 50,000 emails get sent to every council person, the mayor, and there's a lane down that Hennepin Avenue, whether you want it or not. And so our own arts community should be thinking like that, because they should actually be going to the city and saying, where's our cultural infrastructure plan? We don't have one. Where is the support for ensuring this is lasting forever? And this should be on behalf of every person in the city. And my job is to deliver creative or arts and culture to every single person that lives here, and that find opportunities for every artist that lives here or wants to work here to allow them to thrive. And we should be heaving with arts and creativity all over our city. And maybe when we do have it literally everywhere, which is really special. But I'm recognizing these bigger forces at play, and because the city itself doesn't have the muscle of supporting arts and culture like it supports everything else, this is the new era we're in, and it requires the community to demand it. Yeah. It's not me just saying I want it. People are elected into offices to respond to issues that are important to the community, and if the community demands it, then they listen. It's not just, oh, you can go find some funding. Can't we just call McKnight Foundation and that funding that we were talking about, that we've all been going after for years and years and years, that was never enough to begin with. That was just that's icing on the cake, but it shouldn't be the cake, because it's fickle, because it all ended.
Right.
And so where is our stability and sustainable practice for our city? And also, how do we want to operate as a city? What's the Minneapolis way of what we could really sort of graciously come together and advocate for bigger arts and cultural support? It does really require people like this. So I was talking to a major organization in town, and they were trying to find out if there's any money they could find in the city. And I said, what would be really helpful is if all your audiences emailed, your council district person and demand a meeting. That's what really turns the table, like other organizations do, that service organizations do, that issue organizations do. And so it really does require the community of arts and culture enthusiasts to actually be much more advocates and activists in the new era that I'm imagining.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm just thinking they should have had a business person interview, because this is triggering for me. So many of the things that you're saying as someone who is an artist and is feels the tension of not collaborating with other arts organizations because we're all seeking the same funding. A lot of the things that you're mentioning, the walking on eggshells, feels very real, and I think there are others in the room nodding who are yes. And there's so many things you're touching on that I want to circle back to. I wonder, so far kind of what we're hearing are the theories and the visions. And so maybe you could say a few words about some of the initiatives that you all are working on. Like, what does this look like in practice?
Yeah, so what I'm focusing on right now is how to support the different art sectors. So music, dance, theater, film, visual art, literary art, craft design, architecture, culinary, festivals, fashion, presenters, venues, climate justice, social justice, climate change, creative technology, arts education. And I say all of that because that's what our city is. It's all of these things seeping throughout the whole city. But often I go to these big meetings in the city and they're like, the only thing they talk about is a Taylor Swift concert, which I celebrate, that major artists want to come here, but I don't think that tells the portrait of our city. So we're creating development plans of what does each group need to really thrive and grow and to be incubated in ways, and how do we platform the artists that live here and create those opportunities for them to have real support here, but also opportunities nationally, internationally, as anybody should have. If you're going to be an international world-class art city, let's think on those levels, but also let's think really on the ground here. And two big things that I'm only, the program's only a year old, is we're doing two important initiatives this year that are about to be announced. One is actually very close to you here in downtown. It's, and both were mayoral priorities. One is called the Vibrant Storefronts Initiative. And so it's called Vibrant Storefronts. So this program will be announced at the end of this month. And this is it's a new initiative. And so oftentimes when people think of vibrant storefronts, it's like, putting art in the windows, and then that's really fun to see it, but nobody's actually, that's just a Band-Aid for empty storefronts. And we want to be an active participant in helping to solve what is visibly like an empty downtown, and how do you build vibrancy. But our model is that on one hand, we have an empty downtown of spaces, but we also have an affordable space crisis for artists. So where there are not any spaces enough for people that are affordable. And so I'm trying to solve both issues, and we're piloting a new initiative right now. We're taking over all the empty stores between Bar Lurkat and Lorraine Park through downtown, which is the old Harmon Place area. It's the former car showroom area of Minneapolis. Like where Bar Lurkat used to be the Rolls-Royce store. And the garages to fix like high-end car. It was like crazy. So we're taking over all of those storefronts, and we're inviting, proposals that we're actually paying for the rent for all of these artists, art collectives, and really thinking about creating a new culture cluster right in this area between here and Hennepin Avenue, where it's the active invitation for artists to come back downtown, and the active invitation to reimagine downtown that you're there, but also building new cultural community. As you know, if you are an active participant in going to galleries or to festivals or events all over the city, it's like you have to drive everywhere, right? Nothing is like with intentional design or curating the city to make it the best that it can be. It's like someone shot a gun in the air, and wherever the shrapnel fell on the ground is where arts happen, because they've just found an abandoned store, or they just go to where affordable. So we're sort of reinventing this model. And so we're inviting, we're talking to Minnesota Fashion Week about having a fashion incubator. So where do you go if you're a designer and creative? We're talking to the American Indian Center about having an Ojibwe beadwork lab. We're talking to a couple theater companies about having a theater rehearsal residency lab. We're talking to the public school system's arts and visual arts program to see if they could take over a space where all the arts teachers can do monthly exhibitions, but then have a place for artistically motivated youth from Minneapolis to meet artistically motivated youth from St. Paul. So we're taking over all of the empty spaces, and we're saying we can have this new creative way. And I'm not creating a gallery row or a retail district. We're creating a new center that models new ways of supporting artists in our city, but also bringing these sectors together because they often don't get to talk to each other. Plus, I just want to beautify what is a natural area between the Walker and downtown and say, this is going to be your new downtown art loop. So you could just go walk over and be like, oh, what am I discovering? We met with 30 craft organizations last week, and so all the textile groups are going to work together to say, let's have our own lab for quilting, for knitting, for creating new designs, for making fabrics, reusable fabrics, and creating stuff. And so like people are really like, oh, this is really going to be cool once we have this. And this would be a Minneapolis way of working where we're galvanizing community around common ideas.
Can I just interrupt? So it's amazing to provide free rent for 2 years for all these folks. What do we anticipate will happen after 2 years? I mean, will this, like, is this neighborhood not just becoming more and more expensive? Do we hope that we'll catch up in the next 2 years in terms of city support in a way that can help people sustain this?
Yeah, so that's just, we want them to commit to 2 years with the intention that it'll be renewed after 2 years. We didn't want it to be, so we didn't want the building owners to pull out of their lease because, you know, a cannabis store wants to move in there. So in many ways, this is a stabilizing infrastructure investment because we're guaranteeing the rent. And then it just allows, by the time a group gets in there, it's going to take a year for them to start actively engaging in building community. And the only outcome for them that they have to do is they have to do a monthly or quarterly open house and invite the community to come in and walk in, but also be available for anybody who wants to be creative in that way or find their tribe in many ways. Another program that we're doing, so we're investing in downtown, and then we are also actively, there's a new program called the Cultural Districts Program, and there are 7 cultural districts in our city. And one is Lowry Avenue, West Broadway, North Minneapolis, Central Avenue, Cedar Riverside, 38th Street, George Floyd Square, East Franklin, and then East Lake Street. And this is, these were designed as political districts, and so we're adding an arts and cultural overlay on each of those districts. And there's going to be money to support existing festivals and or cultural spaces so they're not displaced, but also allows them to amplify their work as well as hire more artists to be part of them. Some of the funding will also be to create new arts activations in the city. So I'm trying to get our whole city back to really being creative, moving us forward, funding creative ambition. So this is smaller money, like $5,000 grants. Like, you have always had this wild hair of a creative idea for your neighborhood. You know what's good for your neighborhood. Here's money to do that. So I was talking to this one guy. He's like, I've always wanted to do this thing where it's an art project for kids. They all get new, or they take used shoes from the thrift store, decorate them with sequins and feathers. They have a huge shoe parade and a big dance party with their new shoes. Like, yeah, we want to have that happen.
Why not?
But it can be literary, it can be anything. And so people are thinking pop-up parties or public art or murals, or, you know, we want to get these neighborhoods actively creative. And people, I always trust artists to come into any space and understand how to creatively reimagine it. And so a lot of what I'm talking about is that no one's come in and said, what is the opportunity here? It can't just be, I want to have like more retail. I mean, that could be an answer. But how do we invest in the creativity of our city and really centering the value relationship in that? And then another part of that money will go to identifying an ambassador of each of the neighborhoods, where they will coordinate all the arts and cultural organizations in that neighborhood to have a quarterly gathering where they are just hanging out with each other and talking about future projects, planning. And so in many ways, it's a neighborhood cohesion strategy. And that money is to pay for the labor of coordinating that group, the site where they would have the gathering, and then the gathering expenses, which is code for food to have there. So those are 2 new initiatives that are starting. And then we have just asked if we can expand them going in next year so we can even do more of that in downtown. Like, look, you know, like, are there specific areas in the Skyways that would be a total, like, artery of art that would actually be a good place to go, that people would know that they could go to, or moving it up to uptown? We're really trying to actively look at the spaces and places that really need new creativity and new vibrancy.
So, I know downtown, like this being our church neighborhood, there's been a lot of anxiety of, particularly post-COVID, of everything kind of feeling like it's shut down, and how will that affect, Westminster and all of that. But also there's this huge city vision for increased housing and now all of this arts and culture. So, what do you imagine, and how long are we talking, like in 5 years, in 10 years, like what will this neighborhood, what could be the potential that it could transform into, and then what might you imagine could be like Westminster's role in that?
It's hard for me to imagine what it is in 10 years because I'm trying to sort of figure out what the next 2 years will look like as just sort of interjecting arts and culture. So oftentimes if you've got a sick body, and the body is, let's say our downtown is a body, let's say it's ridden with cancer, do you treat that with a Band-Aid or do you give it 360 care? So I'm trying to imagine 360 care as opposed to just piecemealing our way through the city as quickly as possible. And I think that this church is such a beautiful church and such an important part of the fabric of the city, and you're so centrally located. I mean, this venue is just gorgeous. Just looking at this in your art and in your lobby just tells me you value arts and culture and spaces. And so I hope that there is a way for you to, activate that goal and that role of arts and culture in our city, as well as spiritual practice and community gathering. I'm actually inspired by this area because, when I was living in Los Angeles, there was a couple of old historic churches that I loved, and they had services on Sundays and during the week, but like on Fridays and Saturday nights, they had indie music concerts. And it was so awesome. And then I was thinking of, there's this really beautiful festival that happened in New York City called the White Lights Festival, which was run by Lincoln Center, and it's a whole half a year long festival devoted to spirituality. But not necessarily religion, but the idea of spirituality. And then I was lucky enough to go to the Fez Festival of Sacred Music in Morocco, which was a global international arts festival, where again it was about spirituality of global ideas. And so I've been thinking about, is there a way to take all these gorgeous old churches as part of a new festival where we're investing in sort of not only having people come to these facilities and these spaces because they're so cool and beautiful. And I don't know how many people have access to any of these old archaeological gems. But also, say that there is a role for the churches in your church to think about itself in the cultural life of this city. That's not just about getting new congregants, or it's not just about, what you do. It's like, oh, you might have a bigger idea about what you can do. I know you have a lot of great programming here. So, but it could even be more, right? And you could also collaborate with all your churches in a new way. And how would that look and be modeled for the rest of our city about how everyone's working together? So I'm imagining a new festival where it's kind of bringing together and inspired by the architecture of the space and bringing new audiences and see culture inspired by spirituality, but that's really focused on vocal music, classical music, some acoustic indie music, and electronica.
Amazing.
We're gonna call it Aurora. It's a new festival of spirituality and all the churches working together.
In midwinter, you said.
In the middle of winter,
In
yeah.
the middle of winter.
The winter light.
Which is like half the year anyway, so that we have so many months to choose from. This is so exciting. And momentarily we'll turn to some question and answer time. And so I hope you guys are already thinking of all the things you want to ask about. I'm remembering that you grew up Presbyterian. Isn't that kind of fun? So I had to share
My dad
that.
was Lutheran and my mom was Baptist.
Okay.
And we were raised Presbyterian.
That seems like a good combo of things. One of the things that I loved when we spoke the other day was that you described yourself as curating this city. And so I wonder if you have any kind of closing thoughts you want to say on just hopes and aspirations for all of this, or other big cities. You've mentioned a couple that we might look to that we aspire to, but also that advocacy piece, which seems so important of how we can just gather around this and support it. So just final thoughts that you would leave us with as we think then to turn to some Q&A.
Yeah, so just about curating a city or artistically directing a city, because there is nobody in the city talking about the arts until now. And so, not that there aren't creative people. Margaret Anderson Kelleher, who's our CEO of the city, is a quilter, and she proudly is an artist and wants to be an advocate. And even the mayor's yesterday State of the City was all about the role of art in our city and how important it is and how we have to invest in it. And but unless there's dedicated staff focusing on looking at the infrastructure and the conditions to support it and how to get money to artist hands and also figure out ways for partnership and collaboration and bigger ideas to happen, and to advocate what's happening here on a national, international level, but also advocate for a new cultural infrastructure plan, it does require staff to do that. I know that when I came here, I was sort of, saying, having been to festivals and programs all over the world and working in bigger cities and also working actively in Minneapolis, just saying, like, what is our city now? What is it? Or what isn't it? What do we have and what don't we have? And I was like, because I'm part of all these, like the Downtown Improvement District and the Meet Minneapolis and the Renaissance Coalition, and there's all these people working on like figuring out what to do. And none of it really is about arts and culture. It's like, well, if you want a gallery row, you've got to invest in, like, one, let's have one, but like, let's have a world-class one. So, what does that mean to sort of center like a world-class gallery to come to Minneapolis? Like, what does that feel like? And I don't think that, and I'm not discrediting anybody, I'm just saying if we're gonna have world-class businesses or world-class retail or world-class sports teams, should we not also have world-class arts and cultural opportunities? Like, that's what Minneapolis is. Like, we should be that thing for everybody. But also, like, what are some cool, great new ideas and what's uniquely aesthetic or what's our unique culture that we should be amplifying and not erasing? Like, I don't want to turn our downtown into a suburb. We have suburbs. What do you get when you come to a city? What are cities for? So I was thinking a lot about this when I arrived, and I'd like you to all think about that. But I was coming like, okay, so what do I see? Like, we don't have, like I just said, a gallery row. We don't have a Rodeo Drive. We don't have an Eat Street, and specifically about downtown. We don't have, a public market. We don't have a year-round farmer's market. We don't have, our big museum is in South Minneapolis, not in downtown. We don't have a children's museum. We don't have any children's anything in downtown. We don't have a big Tate Museum on the water. We don't have a Sydney Opera House on the water. We don't have a Lincoln Center on the water. What we have is, we do have a number of historic theaters, which are real assets to downtown. But what we really have is like, I'm such a preservationist and historian at heart. Like, the idea that we tore down 22 square blocks in the 1950s and then left them empty for 30 years, we would be the New Orleans of the North if we had not torn down all of that historic stuff. But what did we do? We built giant monuments of modernist architecture, which kind of sit empty and are there with nothing. And we built a sports campus out of our downtown. And so then that's great because we should have great sports teams, but that is also what I think has impacted sort of like the lack of vibrancy of our downtown. And now all of our corporations have left. And so what's left? Artists are still here, and so they should be invested in. And in many ways, I think about, has the corporate cleanse of downtown been a good thing for our city? Because it allows us to reimagine the values and identity of what Minneapolis could be. And if we invest in the imagination, because we've underinvested in it, then this is an opportunity for us to reimagine that. And so it was also sort of an understanding of like, do you understand how power works? So meanwhile, while everybody was groveling at the feet of foundations, corporations, major corporations were saying, you know what, if we just tear down half of downtown, build these giant entertainment complexes, this is a great model for us to make money off of Minneapolis or Minnesotans. And then also if we just invest in promoting only to suburban and outstate communities to come here and extract or buy or purchase, and I'm not discrediting any of this, I'm just sort of understanding forces at play, then you're also met with like, you're also importing their value systems into Minneapolis, which is then they're meeting with like, diversity, big ideas, urban conditions, downtowns, really progressive values. And like, oh, I feel unsafe. So as opposed to, we don't invest in what is special about unique that people come to cities for. Because what we've learned is like, people love coming to our world-class restaurants, which is great. Where's our incubator to even have it more? None of our festivals that we have here, the Uptown Art Fair, Loring Park, Basilica, none of that is supported by the city at all. That's all the backs of art, like individuals doing that. So then it was like, okay, then what do we invest in, or what have you paid taxes to invest in? So you've all paid for these sports stadiums. You've paid for the renovation of the historic theaters. And there's a tax on the city called the Downtown Entertainment Tax. And this tax is on the backs of live music. So any live music event that happens, that any beverages or food that's sold goes to the state and comes back to the city and is spent first on maintenance of the convention center and then on the Viking Stadium. And so there's no circle back reinvestment of that. I'm like, oh my gosh. So not only have, so those spaces are called the Convention Center, the Viking Stadium, the Twin Stadium, the Target Center, and the historic theaters were called city assets. And I'm trying to advocate that there's one more. It's called our arts and cultural ecosystem. So they should get some money and reinvest it back into it. But another way of thinking about that is when you spend billions of dollars to let, I always tell people, with that investment in the city, do you know who's making the money? Who makes the money off that investment? I can tell you it's not Minneapolis. All that money goes to is for-profit Broadway producers in New York. It goes to Live Nation and Ticketmaster in Beverly Hills, and I used to work across the street from their offices. And it goes to billionaire team owners that don't live here, and they don't care if our downtown dies, as long as they can have these giant ways to make money. And so so that's what real power looks like. Business leaders have allowed the takeover or corporatizing of our downtown. And so, and that's also when you spend billions, you have all spent billions, on letting billionaires make money off of you, that's also what funding inequity looks like. So there's a reason why our city is so traumatized by inequities, because that's what we've invested in, because we have no way, there's no circle back into where you're spending money on. But that's just my thesis of what I'm seeing. So now we have a time to course correct in this really healthy, authentic, vibrant way. And so that's what I'm hoping that we do, and it's person by person, artist by artist, block by block, house by house, family by family.
Church by church.
Church by church.
Yeah. Wow.
Service by service.
I feel like I've had the easiest job because I didn't even need to be here. You have so much to say and so many amazing and kind of new thoughts. So I hope it's been kind of percolating for you all. And I wonder if we can take some time to do questions. Do we have another mic? Oh, good. Sue's got a mic. So I see a question here. Sue, right by you.
Okay.
You were such an amazingly dynamic thinker, and both of you are actually, but for now I'm directing my thoughts to you. Just such dynamic ideas, and are so articulate in expressing them. I have more hope than I've had since I moved here about the re-energizing of downtown, because if it's not about arts and culture, what is it about? Some other people, of course, have different ideas, but I think that's exactly what we need. My question is that I've done a lot of advocacy in my life in different ways, as probably everyone has here. I'd like to know in more detail what exactly you are doing personally in larger board tables and so forth, where arts and culture can be part of the discussion, and also what are you and the leaders of the different sectors of the arts doing relative to, say, an email kind of advocacy action line? I think we need, as you mentioned, you need support from a lot of people, and I think you can get it, but how are you going about that?
Okay, there's a lot of questions in there, so I'm trying to see if I remember them. If I don't, just tell me. So I think one of the things that the conversation is right now is how do we build a city of advocates? And how do we teach everyone to do advocacy? And what does that look like? I can tell you what it looked like to me last year, being here for the first year, going through the budgetary process. And, the budget is all transparent, believe it or not. And you get to, as citizens, go to, first of all, you can demand a meeting or request a meeting. Demand is the wrong word, but request a meeting. And, with your own council district, I think it's Katie Cashman, or it could be someone else. It's Cashman. So just say, we want to meet with you because we want to articulate that we really want to center arts and culture, so please support that. And she is really supportive, but it means so much more when the community, her job is to respond to constituents' desires. So that's one thing, but we're also looking at how do we turn from this whole thing of only going after philanthropy to industry and advocacy as part of that. And so how do people how can they afford to live here, have businesses here, and make money off of their creativity, but also share that with the rest of what we do here in Minneapolis. And so advocacy is one thing. So we're starting that process now of saying, what does Minneapolis uniquely need? If we're going to be the symbol of it for the whole state, how do we invest in that? And this becomes one of the big things we're known for. How do we maintain the state fair energy all year long in Minneapolis, not just 1 week a year? So that's part of it. Then for each of the sectors, we're just starting to meet with all of the theater companies, all dance companies, all of the film scene, all of the venues, all of the festivals. And so we're asking each, what are the 5 to 6 easy policies we can change to affect you to do it? So that is happening. So all the festivals, we're noting that there's all of these increased required costs to throw a festival in our city because of the price of permits and the price of policing. And so there's going to be a new fund that they can apply for to eliminate that part of their money, so they're not paying for that, they're actually paying for the art to happen. For instance, the Cole Center, as we know, closed after 25 years. How do we reframe that as one of the most important landmarks in our city, as one of the last spaces in downtown that's actually devoted to local artists? Everything else is devoted to touring artists, except for Minnesota Orchestra. And so, but that was for dance and theater, and that is a cultural jewel that we should have. I was like, where is the street closure with dance companies and audiences demanding what is the city going to do about that? But nobody did anything. And so I was going back to the budget process. So we're looking at all these things and figuring out maybe we need to take a step back with the Cole Center and reimagine it as a new center of something of arts and culture, and really invest in it as the platform and metaphor of what's possible in our city. And we hosted 3 town halls with dance community. 300 came to the Women's Club and all expressed what they needed. And so we're actively engaging and organizing in all of these different communities to find out what the need is. But then I'm also saying, well, how do we take that need and not just settle for what we have, but how do we actually make us even a better arts community so that they're competitive for national grants, that they get booked on national tours, that we support them in all of their different capacities? But then, so I went through so the reason why I have all these thoughts about advocacy is because I just went through the budgetary process, and they have all of these open forums that the community can come to and advocate for budgets. So now we have a strong mayor system, so the mayor gets to propose a budget, and then the council members get to reorganize the money based on what they want, or they get to advocate for it, and then they all vote on it. There wasn't one artist or arts organization or advocate for arts and culture who came to any of these forums and advocated for arts and culture. No one has. And then I tell this story to some people, well, we've never been taught that. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm telling you right now, this is a way. We have not been taught to learn how to work with cities. And I was part of that too. Growing up as an arts administrator here, no one ever said to me, do you know how to work with a city? That's where all the money can possibly come from, and from the state to demand it. There should be no reason why we don't have a $50 million budget to help support all of our institutions and grant programs to support the wildest of creativity in every pocket of the city. And if we had this department 50 years ago, we'd probably have that. Every one of our major arts organizations is suffering. And every artist then too is as well. So there is a real need for change in the way that we think about how we support our whole ecosystem. And it isn't just about the Guthrie going, it's the entire theater community needs to go and tell their audiences to go to support advocacy. And I don't do this just because this is what I do in my job. And just this is an important thing in the city of Minneapolis, in the state of Minnesota. And if we want to have this, we should really look at this as a new way of thinking about how to support that. It seems to have money for everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot, and people say, well, you shouldn't focus on that because there are other crises. And I'm like, yeah, there are, and those will always be there, but the arts are in crisis too, and that needs to be supported as well.
Yes. Thank you. Sue?
Ben, what was your, the beautiful bells. What was your corridor that you mentioned from Harmon Park?
The corridor is really from like Barler Cat, Loring Park, into downtown, the Harmon Place area. That's going to be the new arts corridor, and a few other locations in downtown that are really prime. I want to tell you about this great idea that the Norway House had. So we've been going to meeting with everybody, and I'm telling them about these grants, and like, oh, we've always wanted to do the Run for the Bells, where the 25 miles through the city, where everybody is ringing their bells as the runners run through, as a bell thing, and then have bell choirs on the corner.
Great. Well,
Like that's the kind of thing that could uniquely happen in Minneapolis.
Yeah, we've got a good system set up for that. Looks like Bill's got a question over here.
Yeah, Ben, thank you very much. I was wondering, there, in the late 70s, there was a Minneapolis Arts Commission that existed. I don't recall when it went out of existence, but I recall that there was a conference that they put on called The Role of the Arts in Urban Economic Development.
What was it called?
The conference?
Yeah.
The Role of the Arts in Urban Economic Development. And there was a report out from that too, which must be gathering dust somewhere. But they had there were several organizations that were spawned, like the Art Space Reuse Project, which had a number of, encouraged artists to settle in the North Loop District. And the other one that I was thinking of too was there was a Minneapolis Film Commission that was active at the same time. So the question is, what happened to all of that, or do you have any idea of what happened and all of that?
And we used to have a Minnesota Dance Alliance, and I think a Theater Alliance. We still have a Minneapolis Arts Commission. It's very active. And if you are interested in the Arts Commission, they talk about primarily public art in our city. You know, we have one dedicated funding source based on a 1% tax of any development. So we have a person who's been managing our public art in our city for 25 years. But we haven't had a murals program like other major cities do, and we don't have a temporary public art program. And so those are two opportunities for us to expand that specific area. But in terms of that report and those other commissions, I'm not sure what happened during all those. Sadly, they all went away. But we still do have a Minneapolis Arts Commission.
Carol.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I'm curious about who or whom were the people that wanted to start this job for you. There must be some people that would support you wholeheartedly.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Who or whom started the impetus to create this position for you?
I do believe that it was Councilmember Andrea Jenkins and Alondra Cano. And Councilmember Jenkins is still on the council, and Alondra is no longer.
So she said there must be some people who are supportive of this program.
I think that the concern was, why would we start this new department for our city during COVID and during the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd?
Right.
Bob.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Johnson, it really caught my ear earlier in your presentation and earlier in your conversation, that for art, to build culture, to build community, it has to come from the community, the desire and the request from the community. And the first thing I thought of was George Floyd Square. That certainly came from the community and largely a positive thing. Now it features a raised fist. do we really need to be concerned about a negative image like that? As long as that raised fist isn't holding a Molotov cocktail, I guess, which would be extremely, negative. And George Floyd Square looks pretty good, and maybe it's built community. The vibrant Lake Street you mentioned, and I guess it's not for me to say about the raised fist being negative. It really did come from the community, I guess, and that alone is a good thing. One last thing I'll mention: you covered downtown art, and I remember from being a kid, taking the bus home to North Minneapolis, Gateway Square, with a magnificent flagpole and a fountain. For me, that was a positive thing. Of course, it was filled with, it was Skid Row, and it was filled with negative images of drunk people, but it was still an uplifting thing for me. And one last thing I'll mention, on Nicollet Mall, as a young person in the 1970s maybe, I remember a granite fountain that Lady Bird Johnson came and dedicated. So, and I've always looked for that. Just the little things sometimes are uplifting to me. And I think that's all the comments I have. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Other questions?
I was curious in terms of other organizations, either at the city level or county or state level. Minnesota State Arts Board comes to mind in terms of coordinating with them, and I presume you've been in contact with them. And how is that, say, at a state level, different than what you're proposing, or are they quite similar?
Yeah, so we have, like a lot of states, there's a state arts board, and their job is they're the manager of the legacy funds, as well as a number of initiatives. And so arts organizations in Minneapolis can apply for those things, those opportunities. There's also a Metropolitan Regional Arts Council that is also a redirection of funds down. And it is amazing that we distribute so much funding all over the state. But I will say a lot of that funding is very small, so it keeps everything small. It doesn't make, magical, transformative things happen. My point of view is that because Minneapolis is such a repository of where big arts can happen and where artists want to live, and we want to have so many things centered here, that we should invest in that in a way. There are state arts programs in California, there are state arts programs in Texas, there are state arts programs in New York, but each of those cities, major cities, have their own departments that really invest in the quality of life of the people who live in that city. And if this is a city where we want to encourage artists to move, or we want to encourage creativity to happen, and we want big things to happen, like festivals, or if we want big orchestras or big art exhibitions, or we want to invest in artists to realize their most creative projects and ideas, then it would require us to have that and be part of what our identity is. You've invested in major sports teams. Mm-hmm. So that's been invested in. Mm-hmm. But now there's a call, and I'm not anti-sports, I just want you to be clear. And I'm glad that big world-class artists want to come and perform here. We're still not 100% on the touring route. But every now and then we're going to get that artist because we have the venues. But that machine, that national entertainment for-profit corporate machine of bringing music here is different than funding and supporting our own creative artists and the youth. There's basically no arts education in our public schools right now. There's no festival support. All of our major institutions are totally, retracting and cracking at the edges. Mm-hmm. There's no program to support artists to do what they want to do in this community. And if we want to affect real positive change, we'll find new ways of support. And they do so much for our community in terms of bringing people together, creating the vibrancy that we love, and just investing in the way that we see the world here in Minneapolis. And I just want us to be the symbol of that everywhere. In many ways, people love us nationally, and somehow we don't love ourselves as much as other people do. So we're trying to move us forward. One of my staff members says, the opposite of depression is expression. And in many ways, the experiences we've had in the last couple of years has made us a depressed city. And we remember back to the glory old days of when things were different. And so this is a way, investing in arts is a way for us to move forward. And it's a symbol of the positive way that we can actually work together.
I keep wondering about like the Northrop King building and Art Whirl and all of that. I mean, do you have thoughts on like is that an example of where something kind of good is happening, or is that I don't know enough about that neighborhood? Is there still like a lot
it's
of
amazing.
opportunity?
We have the #1 rated arts district in America. We don't know how to brag about our own city in many ways. Like, what's so special about these things? I'd like us to have 10 Northrop Kings. Mm-hmm. Why do we just have to settle for one?
Yeah. I think we have time, for a few more questions. It'll help us for the live stream. Yeah.
Ben, the communities that you have worked in before have had, particularly most recently, a huge demographic from which to draw. We are smaller than those areas, Ann Arbor being the exception. How can you imagine, in the context of our population and the demographic that we bring to the table?
Could you just repeat that a little bit? It's just a little hard to hear.
How do you imagine bringing arts and expanding these wonderful programs within the context of the smaller demographic population, other factors that you were able to utilize in your most recent positions?
Well, that's a good question. And I would just like to think that regardless of size, we still want to be a world-class art city. And that we are Minneapolis, but we're part of a multi-citied ecosystem. So we have lots of cities, but one ecosystem. And how Minneapolis reinvents itself in the next 5 years through arts and culture will be a driving force for the creative and economic change we see in our city, but also the answer to how we would fund it as well. And it will require advocacy and policy change, but also just the real investment in the imagination of the creatives in this community. And I think all of you are part of that. It's not just like, let's rely on me or artists to do all this work. It's like really the community has to say, oh no, we need to have all this stuff happening. And you know, the city of Winona is knocking it out of the park and drawing audiences. I'm driving 3 miles, 3 hours to go to Western Minnesota to go to art crawls. We don't have any of that stuff here. And we're not talking about it in that same way. And so we are needing to shape our city and really figure out ways to like help the broader state and Midwest and our own community to like really understand what's so special and unique about us and really celebrate it. So part of that is just shaping it and bragging about what we have. For instance, I just had 2 friends visit me over the weekend from Santa Barbara. Both are artists, and they were just so blown away by Minneapolis. Well, of course, I took them on the ultimate tour of Minneapolis. So.
Ooh, you're gonna have to tell us what
But they were like, I can't believe the support. I can't believe how many art spaces. They couldn't believe how it was, they just were out of their minds. And like, yeah, if you figure out how to shape it together. So I'm a trained curator and programmer, and so my job is to look at everything and say, this is what we could tease out to be special. And I don't know if our city yet knows how to promote us in that right way, because they're so about big events and big conferences and big things when, you know, those are great, those just come and visit us and fill hotel rooms. But I don't work for the hotel lobby. Yes, I want the hotel rooms to be successful. And there's a tax on all of that gets cycled back into the city. So it's kind of like, what is our role to immediately supercharge our city into a new sensibility about the role of arts and culture in a way that we've just taken for granted for all these numbers of years.
And I heard you mention us as a multi-city ecosystem, and you even mentioned like a space for kids from Minneapolis and St. Paul to create together. Is there any vision for a collaboration with St. Paul? Like that city does not have a same position equivalent to yours?
So much was driven recently in St. Paul, but they've started I think it was called the Northern Star Grant, and all the artists in Minneapolis went to apply for it because they were trying to import creativity and artists into their city. And they'll follow the funding. They'll magically go in and do events at the Union Station and on streets and down by the water and wherever they need to go. And yeah, we're absolutely going to work with all the cities to work with us. And we want to be a collaborative city, not an independent thing, at least in my opinion. They do have, and so much is dictated by the mayor. So if the mayor wanted funding, and I think that's what happened in St. Paul, they identified a person who then was like, oh, I'm going to help orchestrate and make things happen because, you know, a lot of people work in cities, but their jobs aren't that specific role. And then ultimately it comes down to having money. Money equals impact. But I also am finding a great role in just bringing my art sectors together because no one is sort of telling all the arts community to come together and hang out and network. I was a product of like really great mentorship when I worked at the Ordway Music Theater years ago and in Michigan and in LA, and just like the active invitation of all the art sectors to just hang out and have a reception. So we hosted our first arts leadership reception this past fall, and people haven't been invited to those in years. The head of Mixed Blood's like, I've never been invited to one of these. I was like, what? Is that possible? And so we're hosting our next one on the rooftop of Hennepin Theater Center this summer, and then we'll just do that on a
we
big-
should host one in this space.
You could absolutely
So
host one in
let's
this space.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more question, anyone? Yeah?
As you speak, Mr. Johnson, I've been thinking about the different levels of government that make up this metropolitan area. We got the city, we got the suburbs, we got the county, and we got the metropolitan council. And it would seem to me that some of this would be better done at a little wider range because there's a lot of well parts of our metro area, and there's a lot of poorer parts, and Minneapolis actually does better in the poorer parts than in the better parts when it comes to residences. So I was wondering for support in that, isn't it better to try and get a wider base?
Sure, and we're in Hennepin County, right? And so part of what I first did when I arrived was like, where is the money? Who's got the money? So I scrubbed everyone else's budget and said, oh, artists could apply for that. So we promoted all artists. No one knew that these funds existed. And they found this big pocket of money in Hennepin County through a tax on Twins games. And so there was these two grants, and one was for registrations for sports camps. It's $100,000 to pay for registrations for sports camps and for youth 18 and younger. And I said, could dance be a sports camp? And they said yes. So we got 5 applications in immediately of $100,000, and we got 4 of them. And that was money that never existed before in the arts community. Then there was another grant that they just came out with for $25K for arts and music classes, ages 24 and younger. There's not one arts organization I know who knew that this funding existed. And so I asked them, so this is a fund that only a city can apply for. So like, I'm not just gonna apply for a $25K grant for me. I said, I'm in Minneapolis, we have too many arts organizations. And so I said, can I apply as a cluster? Can I invite 45 applicants to apply for $25K? And they said yes. So we just did that. We don't know who got that, but like, that was like money, I'm just taking it from here and going to here. And that would have never happened without someone looking, and no one was looking. So that's easy money that I just was able to find through the Hennepin County. So that does expand the footprint. I think there's so much money in Minneapolis. There's so many Fortune 500 companies, but no one is providing, and this is what the mayor said to me, is like, he looked at me like, you are the first person providing a vision of what to do, of like here. And it's like, because I don't think they're thinking about cultural ecosystems and how to support them and where to get money for, and also how much it costs. It costs money. So we're not asking for a lot of money. People ask, well, how much do you need to fulfill your vision? Like, I just need the salary of one football player. That's all I need.
Touche. Whoa. Wow, this is fabulous. I know we've got a time of lunch coming together. Is that true? And an opportunity to keep conversations going. And I can imagine, too, just having more conversation with you all kind of about, like, what is Westminster's role? How can Westminster be more actively advocating for the arts in downtown, for arts in this space? You know, how can we be a part of this ecosystem with other faith communities? I mean, I just think there's so much opportunity here for further discussion. So I hope we'll continue to engage and that folks will also speak with Ben individually. But let's just give him a huge round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and be in this glorious, beautiful space.
Yes,
and thank you
for your time, and you're welcome to come. You know, as a former Presbyterian, you can come and visit us anytime. We're happy to have
Thinking about it.
Yeah. Wonderful.
I know all that music.
Yeah, awesome. You're in the choir. It just happened. We'll turn it back over to you, Sue.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you both, Ben and Amanda. This has been a very enlightening discussion. I hope it was enlightening for those of you out there too. I do have an announcement before lunch. I'm glad to see you all here. A number of you did not register on Realm, and so I think we're a couple of sandwiches short. So if you didn't register on Realm, can you wait till everybody else gets a sandwich, and then we'll see what's left? Thank you.
And I know, let's see, does someone say a grace before lunch?
That would be nice if you would.
I would be happy to. I know usually Margaret, one of our clergy, is here, and she's in Scotland, so I'll be the pretend clergy. So let's say a word of prayer. Creator God, we give thanks for this time together. We give thanks for Ben and for his work with the city and for the creativity that you have inspired in all of us. We pray that you would work in us through your Spirit to be advocates for a world that is valuing creation and lifting one another up in collaboration. We pray that you would be active in us, that we might be inspired to use our faith in new and artistic ways. And we pray now that you would bless the food that will nourish our bodies to do your work, and that you would bless our conversation with one another as we continue to dream and imagine the world that you would have us create. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, thanks everyone, and enjoy lunch.